Welcome to Stage Explorations, where we interview the theater creatives and artists from the theater world, those who perform on stage that the audience sees, and those behind the theater stage that the audience almost never sees. I am a journalist and theater fan, Buell Brown, and today's guest is...
Hi, I'm Eleanor Burgess. I'm the playwright of Galilee 34, and if you want to learn a bit more about it, give a listen to this conversation.
So my first question is, when did you fall in love with theater, and why did you have to be part of the theater world?
The process of falling in love with theater for me was very gradual. It kind of snuck on without my noticing it. I wasn't a theater kid in school, but I loved watching plays. I was an audience member. I loved going to see the shows at the school, and I loved going to see occasionally my parents would take me and I just loved the experience. And I also loved reading plays. I don't know what it was, just something about it being only the dialogue and having to imagine the world around it. I was kind of like, get to the good stuff with novels. And then when I found that you could read plays, like, this is the good stuff. Something about dialogue and being the way to tell a story really resonated way before I had any idea that that was something I could do. So in retrospect, it makes a ton of sense. But it wasn't until after college, I studied history as an undergrad, which will make sense when we talk about the play. And I was working as a high school history teacher, but I lived in London for a year after college. And in London, the theater is subsidized by the government, and therefore some of it's wonderfully cheap. And even on a first year teaching salary, I could go see a ton of plays. And one of the theaters that I admired, the Arcola Theatre in Hackney, had a writers group I think that met on weekends. And I just put together 10 pages and sent in a play and loved the feeling of it. And so I think that it was always something I'd been interested in and something that I loved. And finally, I had the nerve to try. And once I tried, I was hooked and started writing longer pieces and started doing more and more of it.
When did you fall in love with writing, and when did it go from an interest to an obsession?
Yeah, writing for me, I always loved writing. I was definitely that kid who, thought that creative writing assignments were the coolest thing ever in middle school and into high school. I absolutely loved it. I think that I have also, it's related to theater, I've always loved talking. Just I talk too much, but I like dialogue. I like talking to people. I figure things out in dialogue with other people. And I didn't even know it was unusual until my high school English teacher had us write an assignment illustrating how we think, how our brains work. And I wrote about how when I was just taking a walk and thinking about things, I would imagine a conversation between myself and another person. And that was how I thought things through. And I thought that's how everyone thought. And what everyone did with their spare time was just imagine conversations. So there's a degree to which I was just always really obsessed with imagining conversations. And it's how my brain has worked for as long as I can remember. I think that I had I mentioned sort of a gradual process towards actually trying to write scenes that was sort of stop and start and stop and start. But I think that it became sort of a full-blown addiction when I was lucky enough I got a fellowship at the Huntington Theater, the Huntington Playwrights Fellowship, and it has a writers group that meets every 2 weeks, and playwrights would read each other's work out loud, and just starting to actually hear it. And then the first time I was in a rehearsal room and got to actually work with actors and hear the work, it was just it's my favorite thing to do. It's the best place ever. And so then the thing that I had always loved became a thing that I could actually do, I think. And that changed my life.
The theater experience. Why is it such a unique format for both the actors and the audience to experience?
Oh, theater. I mean, so the process of making theater is unique and the process of seeing theater is unique. But I think that what both of them have in common is gathering together in a space to be together with your phones off and to have an in-person emotional experience with other human beings. I think a lot about, I say frequently that I think theater should feel absolutely nothing like scrolling through Twitter or X. It should feel absolutely nothing like, wasting time on YouTube. It's so magical to be with other human beings and be on the same emotional ride with them and be totally in sync. And they've done studies that show that an audience's heart rate evens out as they watch a play, that they're not even that they're like synchronized. And I think that especially in today's day and age, that experience of like, go on this ride. You don't have to participate. And that's where it's different for actors and for audience members. But for audience members, you don't have to participate. You don't have to react. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to be clever. You don't have to impress anybody. But you can be immersed. You can come on this emotional ride with other human beings. It's a form of like escapism on the one hand, but it's a form of, it's more than life. It's packing years of life into 2 hours at its best. And so you get to like escape and also experience more deeply and feel things all the way. And I think that that's, a lot of what actors are building towards in the rehearsal room is feeling things all the way, just being fully in a moment. And the gift that actors give people is when an actor lets themselves be fully in a moment and be a conduit for an emotion, they unlock that for hundreds of other people in the audience. So so much of the rehearsal process is sort of building that and creating space for actors to do that.
What is it about playwriting that makes you love the format structure so much and the whole entire creation process?
I think, I love playwriting for so many reasons. One thing that I alluded to earlier is that I think that I think in dialogue. I'm a very dialectical thinker. I understand things by sort of having, well, there's this idea and there's this idea, and the truth is somewhere between those ideas. The truth is somewhere, there's some, I think it's a Niels Bohr quotation, that the nature of every great truth is that its opposite is also a great truth. And I think that like there's something about theater that allows you to see reality because you're not stuck in one character's perspective. You don't always in novels and cinema have to be stuck in one character's perspective, but you often are. And there's something about playwriting where you're sort of in this position of letting contradictory things exist together and letting them be in dialogue, that I think is very special and lets you get at something deeper about how the way the world works. And it's certainly how my brain works. Creating theater is amazing because I think the rehearsal process, which we're in the middle of for Galilee 34 as we speak, it's such a special process because you have time, as I do film and TV work, and it's so expensive to be on set that you're kind of always moving forward, and people who are part of the story aren't there that day, and the whole group making a play gathers together and kind of settles in and tries things and edits and explores together until it's really kind of settled into the right shape. And I love the collaboration. I absolutely love sharing the work with other people, and it's being in dialogue. I love being in dialogue, and I love, I only understand my own work when other people come in and say what they're seeing in it. And then that lets me grow it and make it better. So it's a really special art form.
Where did the idea come from for the play Galilee 34, and why did you have to write this play?
The play Galilee 34 is, I think it's been brewing for a very long time. It's for such a long time that I don't even remember the moment that I had the idea. I should go back on my notes app and like retrace when it was, but I don't remember that moment because I feel as if I've been preparing to write it for most of my life. My own background is that part of my family is Jewish and part of my family is Catholic. And I grew up in this sort of tension between those two worldviews and those two, and we're all very interested in history, myself included. And those two worldviews and those two histories and those two ways of looking at faith and God and community and history. And I grew up fascinated by both of them and not really fitting in with either of them. And when I studied history in college, I studied religious history. And for a while, I wanted to be, I always said, like, I want to be a monk, not a nun, which that's not a thing. You can't do that. But like, what I thought about wanting to be a chaplain, wanted to just be more immersed in these really deep truths and deep concepts. I think I was always searching for kind of some form of contact with the divine. And for me, I think I found theater to some degree is where I gather with community to talk about big ideas, and to try to seek perfection, eternity, all of that. So but I think that this play, this idea that sort of there was this different perspective on these stories, I think, Galilee 34 kind of tells the story of the months after the crucifixion and the very, very beginnings of the formation of what would become Christianity, and tell the story of the disciples kind of having no idea what to do because things hadn't gone the way they thought things would go, and disagreeing about what to do next and disagreeing about what the core of Jesus's message was. And I think for me, all these three parts of me, sort of my Jewish background, my Catholic background, and my background as a historian all kind of came together. And I was looking at this moment as a moment in Judaism and Jewish history, and as a moment in Christian history, but also as a moment in like humanity, like history, like how did they live? What might have happened? Like how do human beings talk to each other when they're in mourning, when they're in crisis? And the idea of taking this thing that is so kind of hallowed and sanctified and often, I think, a little dehumanized and idealized, and making it really human and making it about people, kind of putting the flesh on history, stuck in my head at some point. And I think it really crystallized for me around the Virgin Mary, or Miriam, Jesus's mother. I became a mother, and I was like, she was a Jewish mother. Oh my gosh, she was a Jewish mother. I'm a Jewish mother. Like, whoa, like, what if she were a person? What if she were a mother? What if she were not sort of this kind of sanctified image from a fresco, but a human being, coping with her son's legacy and trying to process her grief about what happened with him. And I think that once I became a mom, kind of a lot of things sort of crystallized, and it was time to start writing. That's a very fuzzy answer. I don't know exactly where the play comes from.
Can you tell us the beginning of the play, and as much as you want to give to the audience listening?
So Galilee 34 is set in Galilee, specifically in the town of Nazareth in the year 34 CE. It's some months after Jesus's crucifixion, and several of the disciples are living in the Virgin Mary's house, and trying to remember as much as they can about what Jesus told them, and trying to figure out what to do next and how to preserve his legacy, advance his legacy, and they don't agree about a lot of it, about the right, about what exactly he would have wanted, and about how to move the cause forward, hopefully without endangering too many of them. And they're kind of lost and a little divided and in active mourning, and uncertain who's going to step up and be their next leader. And then this guy Saul shows up, Saul of Tarsus, and Saul says he wants to help, and Saul has some ideas. And the play follows that moment, the moment when sort of leadership, there transfers or splits from especially James or Yaakov, Jesus's younger brother, to Saul, and the beginnings of that divide, which makes it all sound like really solemn and serious, and it's funny and hopefully very human.
Can you cover the themes of your play?
Oh gosh, I think the play really looks at a bunch of things. It looks at which narratives win out and which narratives maybe get lost or forgotten or very consciously ignored. It looks at some of the Jewishness of Jesus's teachings that would get kind of carefully stripped away, at the number of women followers who were very close to him, who wouldn't get to write their own gospel. We don't have an official gospel of Mary Magdalene. We don't have an account from Jesus's mother about his childhood. So it's sort of about the moment before the stories get settled and agreed upon. What are all the stories that could have been told, that didn't win? And it's about how you do good, and a bunch of people who are trying very hard to do good and to be good people and to please God and to live up to their friend's legacy. And, does it look like being a revolutionary and a rabble rouser? Does it look like being charitable? Does it look like being, spiritual? Does it involve tending to the people right next to you? Does it involve going to powerful figures and trying to talk to them? Does it involve, tending to bodies, tending to souls? Can you be a good person if you're fighting with other people about how to be good? If people who are all trying to be really holy are at each other's throats about it. And I think the biggest theme in the end is also just humanity, looking at these often sanctified figures as people who are capable of like jealousy, forgetfulness, pettiness sometimes, crises, feeling lost, feeling grumpy, feeling vulnerable, feeling annoyed. It's putting humanity back onto these stories and imagining them as like just people who are a lot like us, and doing their best.
What are you looking forward when you're sitting down in the theater with the rest of the audience just watching your play, your world premiere?
I love to sit with an audience to watch a new play, one of my new plays. And what I'm always trying to achieve and tweaking for in previews and when it's the first production of a play, it's for people to be on the ride, for people to not stop to think and kibitz and yawn, but to be laughing, definitely. I think plays have to be funny, and the more serious they are, the funnier they have to be. And so I'm very much looking for people to be laughing, and then when it takes a turn to be, you can kind of feel it when you're in the audience, if everyone understands like, oh, crap, that's going to be a thing, and like for the wounds to hit and the laughs to hit and the joy and the grace to hit, and you can hear it in the audience. And I want to give people a really wonderfully emotional ride that will take them through every feeling they can possibly have. And then I want them to leave with so much to talk about. I think is all of my plays are very much designed to not really finish the story, but to be a jumping off point to then, oh, like, what does that imply? What does that mean? Well, here's how I responded. Oh, here's how I responded. That's interesting that we responded differently. They're really, I think the biggest thing that I'm always excited for is when people leave kind of buzzing and turning to the people they came with so much to talk about. And I think this is a play where they will.
What do you want the audience to get out of your play?
I hope that the audience laughs a ton and has fun at the theater. I think they will, especially with this cast, because they're so funny. I hope that the audience is moved by the ideas and possibilities on display, by the sense of what we could be, what we hope for, what we maybe lose along the way, what we've lost in kind of the sands of history, by kind of the daunting task of being human and like trying to get up again the next day in the face of what happens to us, and sort of taking a moment to process that is a daunting task. And then I hope the audience leaves with just so much to talk and think about. I hope that it's a jumping off point for a ton of conversations about, and people have already, people come up to me and talk to me about their own background with religion, their own struggles, joys, what means a lot to them, what they've always had trouble with, and kind of I hope people leave with a permission to go back to these iconic stories and look at them with fresh eyes and find new details and see new possibilities and kind of bring their own ideas and interpretation in.
What do you think will surprise the audience about your play?
I've mentioned this before, but I think people might be surprised by how funny it is and how kind of down and out, and just you hear like Saint Peter and the Virgin Mary, and you think like they're going to be very serious and very pious, and they're, in this iteration, they've got gripes, they've got complaints, they've got achy knees, they've got people in the group who annoy them. So I think that the fun of it all will surprise people. I think the things that are historical and are accurate to the Bible might surprise people, because there's a line early in the play, none of this happened, but all of it's true. And that's sort of a touchstone. I'm messing with some basic facts of the historical order of things a lot, and I kind of don't care because I want to tell the story I want to tell. And people have messed with these facts before a lot. But at the same time, there's also a ton of tiny details that you're kind of like, oh, that actually is exactly how it happens in the Bible, or that's actually like exactly how things went in history. And I think in general, the ability to sort of see things with fresh eyes that we think we know is what I hope that people will be surprised and delighted by. Is like, you can think you know a story and then it's told differently, and suddenly it's a very different story, and yet it is the same story. It's not like we're making up a new story, but the fact that you can come to these very, very familiar people and see new things and new possibilities and new angles to look at them, I hope will be really exciting for people.
I was going to ask, for those people of faith, what do you want that audience to get out of the play? And are there Easter eggs for them also?
Oh, I love that question. So there's a ton of Easter eggs for people who are people of faith, people with familiarity with the Gospels and the letters in the Book of Acts, people who are familiar with the Tanakh, people who are familiar with Hebrew scripture, people who are familiar with the history too. Like if you're like a Roman Empire nerd, if you're devout Jewish scholar, if you're a devout Christian, like I think there's a lot of little things that are extra fun for you and extra illuminating, there's kind of a whole other level the play is operating on, which is like, oh my gosh, that is exactly how that story is told in the book of John. And oh, that is what that's going to become. I think that for people of faith, it's especially exciting for people who already have some familiarity with these stories, or a lot of familiarity with these stories, to have a fresh way of looking at them and a fresh perspective on them that sort of, I think, encourages, hopefully, a new, deeper appreciation for certain elements of the teachings, or of, what could have been and what was. And the characters on stage are people of faith, having very ancient struggles that people of faith have always had about, how do I actually do this? Like, if I'm very, very eager to embrace these books and these teachings and to do it right, what does that actually look like? Because I keep trying and sometimes it doesn't go well, and I'm confused about exactly what God wants from me and exactly why I don't understand certain things. And so I think the people on stage are all people of faith struggling with the things that people of faith struggle with every day. And so I hope that people will find a lot of grace, really, like for our humanity and our failings and our trouble with these things that we've had trouble with from the very beginning. And so much of the play is about the distance between divinity and humanity, and between our aspirations and who we actually are, and trying to find some level of, like, how do you make peace with that? How do you live with that? How do you keep trying even when you're always going to fail, is so much of what the play is about. And I think it's, in that sense, hopefully offering a lot of grace for people of faith who can see their own struggles on stage and their own high moments and hopes, and the things that they question, the things that they wonder about, the things that inspire them, the things that they're striving for. The community must not miss Galilee 34, because the talent alone that's on this stage, you're gonna love them. Like, it's this incredible group of actors being wildly funny and really deep and moving. And it's gonna be like a wild, joyful, emotional ride, and then give you so much to talk about and think about and read more about after you leave. I do think it's a play that really stays on people's minds, and that people keep kind of coming back to and thinking about long after it's ended. I think people should come check out Galilee 34, because I think that in this moment in time in particular, having a place to come where we can kind of wrestle together with the difficulty of being human, and the mysteries of it and the struggles of it, and wrestle with it in a funny way that's fun and touching and moving and deep, and kind of reconnect with our own humanity, and reconnect with kind of that task of, like, being in a society together and being in a world together, and how hard it is to share a world with people that you disagree with, and yet the fact that that's sort of central to existence. I think that's more necessary than ever. I think it's a wonderful time for people to come together and see a funny story about a family trying to make a difference in the world, and all the bumps they run into along the way. And it's going to be one of those ones you remember forever. So do not miss it.
I did add one more question. It's a spoiler alert if obviously, if they haven't seen the play. You ended the play with an open-ended play, not trying to tie everything in a perfect bow. Why was that important to you, to keep the play open-ended?
The ending of the play is kind of open-ended, because I think a lot of what the play is doing is inviting people to imagine all the stories that didn't get told. And if somebody wants to know how the story wrapped up, they can read a history book. It went a certain way. And a lot of what the play is doing is imagining, like, what if it hadn't gone that way? Or what if everyone could have written down their version? And so there's an open-endedness, because I also want to invite the audience to imagine all the things that could have been and all the things that maybe we never got to hear. And I think there's also an ambiguity, because the audience participates in making the meaning of the play. I don't want to tell people what to think about the events of the play or about what happened. I want to invite everyone to sort of see them together. And maybe they're glorious, maybe they're devastating, maybe they're both glorious and devastating. Maybe they're hard to grapple with. Maybe they're the way things go, the way things always go, So I think that for me, the ending hopefully leaves room for people to participate in making the meaning of the play with their own interpretations and feelings, and lets people sit in the complexity of history for a minute, because it doesn't go one way or another way, it goes all the ways.
Many playwrights before I've talked to say theater is their church or their other church. Can you talk about that, how theater is your other church and why it's important not only for you, but personally, but for everybody to go?
Yeah. Theater is my other church. Theater is where I have found community, fellowship, a place to talk about our highest ideals, a place to talk about our greatest failures, a place to talk about struggle and the hard things in life and the hard truths. And for me, it's a place that welcomes everybody. And I've always struggled a bit, I mentioned at the beginning, my family's both Jewish and Catholic, and I've always felt very blessed to be in both those spaces. But the Jewish half of me at church is always like, well, but what does this mean for people who aren't baptized? And the, Catholic half of me is showing up in synagogue and like, what does this mean for people who aren't Jewish? And there's something about theater that's like, it's for everybody. Come as you are. It's for absolutely everybody. Not as a replacement. I'm not suggesting people replace church, but as like, come as you are, whoever you are, be with other people, feel things with them, grieve your losses with them, dream your dreams with them, talk about the hard stuff with them, face the hard stuff with them, escape the hard stuff with them, connect with them, talk with them afterwards. Yeah, it's a place you can go where you can be human, but a little bit more than human, a little eternal, where you can kind of interface with things that are eternal and divine and beautiful, and also interface with things that are like gritty and real and human and painful. And I think we need that. And that's what theater is for me. And what I think it is for a lot of people.
Is there anything else about your play, Galilee 34, that you want to mention?
It's fun. The play is fun. The play is a lot of fun. Yeah, it's fun and it's deep, and I think people will really enjoy it. I'm Eleanor Burgess. I'm the playwright of Galilee 34. Come check out a show that is funny, heartbreaking, potent, and it's going to be one of those ones you remember forever. So do not miss it.
Thank you for listening or watching this podcast episode of Stage Explorations. To learn more about the theater creative and more theater creatives and artists on Stage Explorations, go to www.stageexplorations.com. Once again, that is www.stageexplorations.com. There is no space between stage and explorations. You may find more videos, podcasts, and information about this theater creative and other theater creatives and artists on Stage Explorations YouTube channel. Looking forward to seeing you in the theater.